In a future video, if I ever get around to it, I'm going to be talking about what Catholics believe. But one of the big questions is, what do they believe about the Bible? I just finished my workout. Now I'm just going to relax with the good old Catholic study Bible that I know will say nothing that contradicts my faith. The Songs of Moses. Yes. The Songs of Moses employs multiple elements of the combat myth genre, as it recounts the origins of Israel in a nutshell. You know, that makes a lot of sense. Moses would be a mythical character. Therefore, I don't have to worry about any of the things said in the Bible that might contradict history, as I understand it today. Oh, what's that, Jimmy Aiken?
If you were to hold the kind of traditional view that they were all written by Moses himself, well, then obviously Moses would have to exist. However, it's often pointed out that they don't actually claim to be written by Moses. In fact, there are parts of them, like the death scene for Moses, that Moses could not have written. And so they're conventionally referred to as the books of Moses because they're about him, and they contain traditions that date to his day. So when were they written? Well, scholars have different opinions on that. My opinion is that if you do a careful reading of them, it looks like they were written in the 11th century BC, about the time of David and Solomon. And that means that they're describing events that only occurred a few hundred years earlier. And consequently, that gives us a good basis for believing, just without considerations of faith even in play, that gives us a good basis for believing that there was a historical Moses who was an early Israelite leader and the founder of their nation as an independent nation.
Oh no, Catholic Answers contradicted my Catholic study Bible. What do I do? Hey, this is Ramon, Channel S Alpha 4, and that little bit of bad theater was inspired by something that happened a few days ago. I was listening to an episode of Catholic Answers Live. It was an older episode that I wish I would have saved because when I went back to look for it, it's so old that I couldn't find it. But basically, it was a caller had called in to talk to a priest about the historicity of Moses, because he had just read in this specific Catholic Bible, Catholic study Bible that I happen to own, in this one, that most modern biblical scholars think that Moses was most likely a myth, or at least most of the traditions we attribute to him have mythical qualities. And the priest said, very nonchalantly, not to trust the editors, because every editor has a bias, and that he would actually recommend a different study Bible. I mean, that has Catholic study Bible in the name. So what do you do when the Bible that you have, or the commentary that you have, doesn't agree with the common wisdom of the church? Well, that's the thing. Priests are allowed to disagree with each other. Bishops are allowed to disagree with each other. Not all of them have the same philosophy when it comes to theology. So what does that mean? Does that mean that this Catholic Bible is somehow wrong? Well, let's check this out. The real question here, for Catholics anyway, is, does it have the imperator? And it does. It does have the imperator. Well, the imperator means that nothing in here contradicts Catholic theology. But I just heard a priest say he doesn't agree with what this commentary says. How can both those things be true? Well, here are two Catholic study Bibles. They have different theologies in them. They do. They have different opinions about the same topics. But they're both Catholic study Bibles. How's that possible? This is the Catechism of the Catholic Church. This is the Catechism of the Catholic Church. This one says something different than this one. In fact, there's a new edition that's not out yet that has something even different than both of these. How is that possible? Well, first off, neither of these are dogma. They have some dogma in them, but they're not actually dogma. These are not rule books for Catholics. Check this out. Here are two Catholic Bible dictionaries. They have different definitions on things. They disagree. They agree on several important factors, but they disagree elsewhere. How can that be? Now, on the other hand, there is the Apostolic Fathers. This right here does not have the Imperator. And yet, it's going to be really hard for you to find something in here that a Catholic doesn't agree with. Or at least a Catholic priest or a Catholic theologian or a Catholic scholar doesn't agree with. Yet it doesn't have the Imperator. How's that? This is called the Liturgy of the Hours. This does have the Imperator. And this also has readings. And in these readings are Bible readings, followed by readings of the Church Fathers, or the Apostolic Fathers. Eusebius is in here. Eusebius is in there. And yet, here, we're agreeing with what he says. His interpretation of the Bible, this particular reading is his commentary on Isaiah by Eusebius. That's in here. And his commentary explains what is supposed to be understood when you read Isaiah. The Catholic understanding, anyway. So what's going on? How can one Catholic group, such as Catholic Answers, I should say a lay group like Catholic Answers, disagree with another Catholic program like Taylor Marshall? How's that possible? They're both conservative Catholics. They both, probably both sides fall into a preference for traditional Catholic Mass, and yet they disagree with each other on key issues. Anyone who watches my channel knows I don't agree with Brian Hosworth's interpretation of Catholicism, or Christianity for that matter. Yet we are both Catholic and Christian brothers. How is it that we can disagree on so much? Well, the Catholic Church has only ruled on about 7 things, and then it's made it into doctrine over here. So this is actually volume 1. There's actually several volumes of this. I've been meaning to buy the other volumes. But this has more authority than the Catechism. But this is just one of a 4-volume set, and not everything in here is being followed by everybody. And I would argue that this book, published by, I prefer the Penguin version, by the way, but published by Oxford University Press, St. Augustine's Confessions, I would argue has a little bit more sway over the common Catholic and even the common Christian than that compilation of documents from Vatican II. So what's going on? You want me to get to the point already, but hold on. This is a very popular book right now. This is by Tan Publishing. This is the Manual for Spiritual Warfare. And it's a really interesting book. It's recent. It has the Imperator. It's from 2014. And yet, this is not going to contradict any Catholic teaching. But I can tell you it probably has stuff that doesn't agree with either of those 2 Catholic commentaries that I have. There's those study Bibles. Well, because each Catholic is allowed to believe their own thing. I know, you've been told your entire life that isn't true, that we all have to follow the Pope. We do. We have to follow the Pope in the magisterium, and we have to make sure that our beliefs coincide with tradition. And that tradition doesn't contradict the Bible. That's how we do things. But neither the Bible on its own, nor tradition on its own, is our ultimate authority. Our ultimate authority is God. And we combine tradition with the Bible through the guidance of the bishops in what's called the magisterium, with the Pope as the main mouthpiece for the magisterium. It sounds complicated, right? But it's not. See, the Pope or the magisterium will usually rule on things that are outside of the Bible. If it's in the Bible, you can just go look at it in the Bible, and there it is. It's very clear. If it's something not covered in the Bible, and there's a wide variety of traditions, or even conflicting traditions about a certain topic, and you can't just go to the Bible to look it up, that is where the magisterium goes and gives an opinion. And that opinion can become doctrine. Once it becomes doctrine, if the body, the church militant, the body of the church, that means the members, don't reject it, it can then become dogma. And once it becomes dogma, it's irrevocable and considered infallible. I know, that's a lot. There's a lot of concepts. Let's break it down a little bit easier, because I could be saying something slightly wrong and I don't want to mislead anyone. So I can tell you my personal beliefs, but usually when I'm talking about the Bible, I'm giving you a consensus from different study Bibles from different denominations, including some secular study Bibles that I happen to really like. A lot of Catholics here really like the RSV and really like the study Bible for the New Testament that comes from a certain theology, comes from a certain philosophical perspective. And that's fine. There's a lot of Marian philosophy and theology out there that people really ascribe to. But as a Catholic, you don't have to. You don't have to be a Marian to be a Catholic, just like you don't have to be a Jesuit, or you don't have to be a Benedictine. You don't have to be any of that. You can just be a regular Catholic. So what does that mean? If you don't fall under a certain order and you just go to church, well, you're allowed to interpret, as long as what you believe doesn't contradict the church you're attending. And your church is allowed to believe whatever it wants, as long as it doesn't contradict anything that the bishop that's in charge of that church is teaching. And the bishop's allowed to believe and say anything he wants, as long as that doesn't contradict what the Pope is saying. So as long as there's no contradiction there, you can say whatever you want. And as long as the Pope isn't speaking about something of religious matters, then you don't have to agree with what the Pope says. Just like you don't have to agree with what the bishop says, or what the priest says, or what your parents say. I know, radical thinking, huh? So just like in a family, how the child or the son doesn't have to agree with his brother or his sister or his parents on what food is their favorite, you don't have to agree with the Pope or the bishops or the other Catholics on everything. In fact, you can even have some beliefs that are only unique to yourself, as long as it doesn't conflict with the tradition, as long as you're not going against the family. So you can like music that none of your other family likes. But if your family doesn't want to allow certain language to be spoken at the breakfast table or the dinner table, then you're not going to do that. Because if you do that, you're breaking the rule of the house. See what I'm saying? So Catholic Church has several basic, you want to call it extra biblical teachings. It's going to be mostly around the Virgin Mary. And that's going to be about it. But then there's a question about what do Catholics believe. And I've been wanting to make this video for a long time. It's not going to be this video, but it probably is coming pretty soon, which is the creed. The creed is what Catholics believe. You combine the creed, or at least the two most common versions of the creed, with the 7 teachings, the 7 infallible rulings of the Pope, and you pretty much have the entirety of Catholic belief as far as it goes to dogma. Now, yeah, there are different special beliefs about certain saints and certain this, certain that, but that's relative to the culture and the region that you're from and the parish that you practice at. But just to be very clear, you can disagree with a priest or a pope just like you can disagree with your father or your mother. What you can't do is actively go against the Pope or the church. What you can't do is break the rules of the church, just like you can't break the rules of the family, not without consequences. But to put it this way, no one's going to hell for a speeding ticket. You're just not. So there are circumstances that can go either way. They can be extenuating, or they can be, they can be condemning. So if you're going 5 miles above the speed limit on a deserted road where there are no lights, where there are no street signs, that no one's considering that a bad thing. Especially if you have a reason, like you're late for an important date, or you're late for, let's say a doctor's appointment, or to get to church, Really, no one's going to judge you for that. But on the other hand, if you're going 100 miles down a neighborhood where there's kids playing, then yeah, people are going to be upset about that. And because of the consequences or the possible consequences of your action, that may or may not be a sin. Same thing here with Catholic theologians, Catholic scholars, and even Catholic bishops disagreeing with each other. As long as their disagreement is within the realm of reason, no one's going to really start a new religion. On the other hand, if it's something fundamental, something extreme, then yeah, schism is possible. Sin is possible there. I just thought I'd explain that to you guys because a lot of people are looking to Lizzie Answers and Brian Halsworth and Taylor Marshall as authorities. And they're even mistakenly looking to Catholic Answers as an authority. Catholic Answers is not an authority, not for the Catholic Church. They're in cells. They're not in the magisterium. That's important to remember. Okay, real quick. What are Catholics required to believe about the Bible? Are they required to believe that the Bible is literal, historical? True? True, yes. Literal and historical? Not necessarily. A Catholic is allowed to believe that everything in the Bible is literal. They're allowed to believe that Genesis is 100% literal, but they don't have to, and most Catholics don't. Just because most Catholics don't doesn't mean that no Catholics do. Within the realm of reason, Catholics are allowed to believe what they want about the Bible, as long as it doesn't contradict the magisterium or sacred tradition. So there are some Catholics who believe the Bible is completely literal. There are other ones who, much like the Church Fathers, interpret much allegory and what some might call metaphor into the Bible. But this analogy and metaphor isn't to discount what it's saying. It's simply so that way it can be easier, more easily understood by someone with a more educated mind. The layman will understand the Bible one way. Someone who's highly educated will understand it a different way. So one of the great things about a book that's compiled from 77 different books is that a lot of different interpretation is possible. So some people will take the creation stories such as Genesis and the flood stories such as Moses as literal. Others will not. And the church doesn't require you to take a literal or metaphorical stance. It requires that you have faith and you believe that it is true. That gets into a whole argument of truth, which I addressed in a different video. There's also another element to this, which is quite simply that this is not a science book. This is not a book trying to explain science and math. So a lot of the information in there is not meant to be understood in a scientific way or a mathematical way. So that's just something to think about. It is theology, and it is philosophy, and it is mysticism. It's not science and history or physics. And the quicker you understand that, the quicker you'll be able to understand the Bible. But like I said, as a Catholic, you're not required to hold one belief on the Bible or another. As long as you hold it as theological truth, that means inspired. And what inspired means is going to be coming from the Holy Spirit or spoken through the Holy Spirit. You might hear some Protestants say the word God breathed or through the finger, written by the finger of God. That means something different in Catholic circles, even though we hold the same belief and they get that wording from us. Their understanding of that is different than the Catholic understanding. Anyway, I hope that gives a basic explanation. So yes, there are some Catholics who will take a fundamentalist approach to the Bible, and that is allowed by the Church. The Church only has several official teachings and only has spoken on several specific verses, especially on the Bible. The rest is up to theologians and scholars and believers to figure out for themselves. Peace, like, and subscribe. Talk to you all later. And remember, when I'm talking, I'm not speaking for the church. I'm speaking for myself. Hope you have a great day. Love you all. God bless.